Our story begins in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Amherst, Virginia. It's here that Reverend Edward Powell and his family were living along the rocky banks of Otter Creek. And what a fine life it was. Ed had a loving wife who had blessed him with 8 healthy young'uns, which were the primary reason that he was already up and working in the corn crop early on that November morning. The air was cool and crisp, and in the distance, Ed took note of the light dusting of snow on the top of Bluff Mountain. The weather had been fair that year and had produced a bountiful harvest, and Ed gave thanks to the Lord as he worked in his split-bottom chair, stripping a mountain of corn ears. However, on this particular day, the humble farmer's mind was troubled over a dream he had had the night before. And in that dream, it was the middle of the night when he heard a noise outside. So Ed opened up his front door to see a shiny black wagon that was drawn by a team of black horses. For some reason, he was drawn to the wagon, so he walked closer, and there appeared to be a man sitting on the back of it. As Ed approached, he was startled because there in the back of that wagon was a tiny, open coffin, and the stranger that was seated beside it was holding the coffin lid in his hand, all while a strange light hovered above the empty coffin, eerily suspended in midair. And then the strange man spoke, "This is my house." Ed suddenly awakened and sprang from his bed to take a look out in the front yard, but there was nothing there. That dream had seemed so real, and for that reason, he didn't sleep another wink for the rest of the night. Back in the present, Mr. Powell heard all of the morning activities that were underway at the homestead. The smell of fresh biscuits and bacon filled the air as Miss Powell was serving breakfast to the children and preparing them for a day at school. Inside the cabin, there was a mild excitement amongst most of the young'uns since there was only a couple of weeks left until that one-room schoolhouse would shut its doors until next spring. That is, everyone except for the youngest boy, affectionately named Ottie. You see, Ottie just didn't feel like school today. "Mama, can I stay home and just help you around the house today?" "Why, Ottie Klein, I declare, what's gotten into you? You know good and well I aim to see all my children get as much book learning as they can. Besides, you're only 6 days shy of your 5th birthday. And you know what they say, the more you can fill a child's head at a young age, the better off he'll be." So, reluctantly, young Ottie put on his only pair of blue jeans and his brown hat and began walking barefooted behind the other siblings who were already far ahead of him on that dusty trail to the one-room schoolhouse. Just then, the boy looked down to see his faithful dog, Old Coy, a short-haired black and tan feist who had run out to greet him and was standing there with his ears all perked up, ready for a full day of adventure with his faithful companion. "I'm sorry, boy. You can't go with me today. Ma says I gotta go to school. But don't you worry. When I get back, you and me, we're gonna chase some rabbits." And with that, the young lad begrudgingly continued on his walk. In the distance, Ed saw that his youngest son was lagging behind the other young'uns, with his head hung low. So he paused his work for a moment and stood there waiting for his son as the road wound past the family barn. "Ottie, what's the matter, son? What's got you down today?" "Pa, can I just stay here and help you work today? I'm real good at shucking corn, and you know I can help keep you company." The loving father bent down on his knees so that he was eye to eye with his son. "Oh, Ottie, son, I understand that you might not have your mind set on going to school today. It's only natural. But you see, we're right lucky to have Miss Gilbert, and she's riding all the way in from Allwood just so she can teach you. Oh, the good Lord sure has blessed us mightily, and we should always be thankful." "Yes, sir, Pa. I am thankful. It's just, the boy's voice fell quiet for a long moment, and Ed put his arms around the child. I love you, Ottie. Don't you worry. I'll be right here waiting for you this afternoon. So the day began, and by the time the sun peeked its head over Rice Mountain, 19 boys and girls had made their way to the tiny one-room schoolhouse situated on the top of Tower Hill. Inside, Miss Nanny Gilbert had already started the wood stove and warmed the classroom, and she eagerly hugged each child as they entered the classroom and greeted them with a tender smile. And before long, education was in full swing. The girls in the class had already cleaned the chalk slates and passed them out, along with a fresh stick of chalk. And for the next 2 hours, the aspiring scholars practiced arithmetic and writing the letters of the alphabet in cursive. All the curriculum and instruction filled every moment of the morning until the teacher announced that it was time for recess. All the girls were instructed to go to the well and refresh the water bucket, while the boys were given the task of gathering firewood from the forest. All of the children were given chestnuts as a snack and told that class would resume in approximately 5 minutes. Ottie was one of 9 boys who had raced into the thicket to load their arms up with sticks or to pull a limb back to school. And as was the custom, each boy tried to outdo the others by bringing the biggest stick back for bragging rights. And within a moment, those boys had spread out like ants in search of their bounty. For Ottie, he had his mind set on finding a good piece of white oak, since his pa always said that it burned the hottest. But he was having no such luck, so Ottie went further into the woods until he spotted a chestnut log that was tangled in a briar thicket. Now, this would have to do, so Ottie set about freeing the timber. Minutes later, Miss Gilbert rang the school bell, and all the children ran back after completing their chores to return to their seats. The small room was crowded, and it took nearly 30 minutes to realize that one child hadn't returned from recess. And that came when she called on young Ottie for his turn to read a paragraph from the storybook of the day. Everyone looked around the room, but Ottie, he was nowhere to be found. The young teacher quickly sent the boys back out into the woods to retrieve him, where they called and called his name, but there was nothing in return. And after an hour of searching in vain, Miss Gilbert sent the children to several nearby houses, including the Powell farm, to get help. When Ed was informed that Ottie was missing, now he wasn't alarmed. He was confident that they would find him. But by 3 p.m., Ottie had been missing for nearly 4 hours. Several men had arrived on the scene, including Ed Powell, who had brought along the boy's dog, Coy, to help in the search. But no sooner than they turned Coy loose, he disappeared into the forest like a lightning bolt, and the men, well, they couldn't keep up with him. So all the volunteers scoured every area behind the school when they soon located the briar patch where Ottie had been wrestling to free the chestnut log. Then they tracked the trail where the young boy had dragged the log behind him, only the tracks were leading the wrong way. Ottie had gotten confused and was heading deeper into the wild mountainside. Minutes later, they found the 12-foot chestnut log that the youngster had dragged a half-mile away before the 4-year-old child finally left it behind and disappeared without a trace into the blackjacks and bramble briars. 4-year-old Ottie Powell was lost, and bad lost, in an area that was teeming with bears, panthers, and every conceivable wild animal. And by nightfall, the tiny schoolhouse was full of women and children, along with the teacher, Miss Gilbert, who was inconsolable with guilt. And outside, the forest was lit up like it was full of lightning bugs by the hundreds of lanterns carried by desperate men who roamed the hills and the hollers, calling the child's name. And by 10 p.m., a cold rain began to fall, and the search had to be called off until morning. The only question that was on everyone's mind was, where was Ottie?
Give someone you love the gift of old-fashioned storytelling. 5 books for the young and old alike that will make your heart smile. Click the link below to order your copy of the Appalachian Storyteller today, also available on Amazon.
By daybreak, the tops of the mountains were blanketed in a thin layer of ice and snow as 1,500 men and women set out in the largest search to ever occur in the county's history. They formed human walls, with each person separated by 4 feet. They searched every log, under every boulder, and every corner of a 5-mile grid surrounding the school. Surely, a 4-year-old child couldn't have made it any further than that, especially since he was climbing up the steep face of Bluff Mountain. Ottie's disappearance was featured in the newspaper, and Ed Powell, he offered a reward of $300, his entire life savings, and the equivalent of $11,000 in today's money for his son's safe return. And by the second night, Ottie's faithful dog, Coy, had returned home, but Ottie was nowhere to be found. Days went by, and some folks began to worry that Ottie had been kidnapped, perhaps by some stranger who had been lurking at the edge of the schoolhouse during recess. Others worried that somehow he had injured himself, and the search party slowly dwindled as many folks returned to their daily lives. And soon, there was only Ed Powell and his brothers. Ed even hired a detective agency to aid in the search. For weeks, they never gave up, climbing deeper and deeper into the rugged wilds. And each night, they returned home with no clues. As winter set in, it became impossible to continue the search in the brutal freezing temperatures and deep snow. And the boy's parents, they fell into a deep sorrow, and his mother's health began to decline as she could barely eat. Newspapers ran articles that some neighbors feared Ed Powell was going insane. To say the least, the couple grieved heavily that dark winter as they began to realize they would most likely never see their son again. Spring was a welcome relief for the folks in the community, and farmers resumed working in their fields as schools started back for the children, and slowly the daily way of life resumed. It was then on Tuesday, April 5th, that a group of 4 hunters, 2 men and their 2 sons, were traveling an old bear trail to cross over the summit of Bluff Mountain, when one of their dogs picked up on something and ran ahead of the group. Minutes later, the dog's barking summoned the entire group to a grassy spot between a white oak tree and a large rock. And in that moment, the body of Ottie Powell was found. The 2 men stayed with Ottie as their sons raced back down the mountain to get Ed Powell. And when the devastated father arrived on the scene, he fell to his knees in silence. Ottie's pants were torn where he had fought his way through the briars on that fateful day. His brown hat was still on his head and his eyes were closed. Somehow, 4-year-old Ottie Powell had climbed 7 brutal miles to the top of Bluff Mountain at nearly 3,400 feet high. Ed wrapped his son's body in a blanket and carried him down, where a local doctor performed an autopsy and found that Ottie's stomach still had the 3 chestnuts in it from recess the day he disappeared. Thus, it was determined that the boy had most likely froze in his sleep on the very first night. As for Ottie's mama, she died of a broken heart a short time later, and Ed spent the rest of his life reliving the strange dream that he had the night before Ottie disappeared, and wondering if Coy did in fact run straight up the mountain to where Ottie was. If he had only followed the dog. Today, the Appalachian Trail runs across the summit of Bluff Mountain, and there, alongside the trail, is a small stone and plaque that reads, "This is the exact spot little Ottie Klein Powell's body was found April 5th, 1891, after straying from Tower Hill School on November 9th, a distance of 7 miles, aged 4 years and 11 months. And 7 miles away from this marker stands another, where the one-room schoolhouse was that Ottie disappeared from, and it reads, "The leaves had fallen from the trees. The mountain caps were white, where little Ottie laid down to sleep that chilly autumn night. His little body was tired and worn from climbing that lofty peak, a rock he had for his pillow, without his mother to kiss him good night. Just how long he slumbered and slept, the Lord above only knows. But when he opened his eyes, he was in the sweet home of his soul."